First of all, to officially commence the forum, may I please invite Dr. Phiset Sa-ardyen, the Executive Director of the Thailand Institute of Justice, to deliver the welcome remarks. Dr. Phiset, you have the floor.
Prime Minister Anutin, Charnvirakul, Professor Dr. Kittipong, Kittayarak, the Chairman of the THA Board of Directors, Ms. Claudia Baroni, Team Leader, Gender in Criminal Justice, UNODC, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Thailand Institute of Justice, it is my honor to welcome you to this international forum, From Vision to Action, 15 years of the Bangkok Rules and the Future of Gender-Responsive Justice, jointly organized by the TIJ and the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. The Bangkok Rules, or the United Nations Rules for the Treatment of Women Prisoners and Non-Custodial Measures for Women Offenders, are the first international guidelines adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 2010 to address the specific needs and vulnerabilities of women in contact with the justice system. Today, as we celebrate its 15th anniversary, we have gathered here for three important reasons. First, to commemorate the milestone and honor the achievement of the international community that brought the first UN guidelines on women prisoners and women offenders to life and continue to uphold them in practice. Second, to create a space for cross-sectoral dialogue, recognizing that the challenges faced by women in prison often intersect with a number of important issues: human rights, gender equality, social protection, and peace and security. Only through multidisciplinary collaboration can we build holistic and sustainable solutions. And third, to look forward to the next decade of collective action, to introduce a new initiative that can turn the promise of the Bangkok Rules into sustained progress. In this regard, I wish to acknowledge the strong leadership of the UNODC. As custodian of the Bangkok Rules, UNODC has been instrumental in advancing gender-responsive justice worldwide. In particular, we appreciate UNODC's leadership in developing the Bangkok Rules Accelerators, a new initiative that will support member states and meaningfully engage women with lived experiences. It creates an important new space for partnership and commitments to grow. I would also like to express our sincere appreciation to Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul and to the Royal Thai government for their continued support and steadfast commitment on this agenda. The leadership dates back to the very origins of what became the Bangkok Rules, and it has continued to be reaffirmed through Thailand's efforts to advance gender-responsive criminal justice policies, both domestically and globally. Finally, as we mark this 15-year milestone, I sincerely hope the momentum to protect and empower women continues to grow in the years ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Phiset Sa-ardyen, for your warm welcome and for setting the stage for this important dialogue today. It is now a profound honor to invite His Excellency Mr. Anutin Charnvirakul, the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Thailand and Minister of Interior, to deliver the opening remarks for this international forum. Your Excellency, the floor is respectfully yours.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I wish we don't have to do this on Friday afternoon, but anyhow, on behalf of the Royal Thai government, it is a great pleasure of mine to be here with you all as we mark a significant milestone, which is the 15th anniversary of the United Nations rules for the treatment of women prisoners and non-custodial measures for women offenders, known globally as the Bangkok Rules. 15 years ago, under the visionary leadership of Her Royal Highness Princess Pachara Kittiyapa Narendra Thepayawati, Thailand put forward the idea that the world needed a dedicated framework to address the vulnerabilities of women in contact with the criminal justice system. With strong international support, this vision became reality when the UN General Assembly adopted the Bangkok Rules in the year 2010. It was a transformative moment that placed gender-responsive justice firmly on the global agenda and created the first international standard for protection for women in custody. Over the past decade and a half, Bangkok Rules have guided national legislation and institutional practices around the world. They also reflect Thailand's broader national priority to strengthen the rule of law and ensure that our criminal justice system is fair, proportionate, and effective. These principles are essential not only for justice, but also for national resilience, peace, and inclusive development. However, despite the progress, significant challenges remain. Women continue to be the fastest growing segment of the global prison population. Many are incarcerated for non-violent or poverty-related offenses, which signals not only individual hardship, but the system failure in social support. The negative consequences of female imprisonment are profound. When a woman enters prisons, families are disrupted, children are placed at risk, and communities lose essential economic and caregiving contributions. This is a human capital loss that extends across generations. If we are to achieve true human development, we must address the root causes that lead women into conflict with the law. When we invest in prevention, create real alternatives to imprisonment, and support women to rebuild their lives, we strengthen the very foundations of our societies. This is why Thailand, in partnership with UNODC, is proud to launch the Bangkok Rules Accelerator, a global initiative designed to transform the vision of Bangkok Rules into coordinated, measurable action over the next 5 years. While Thailand is firmly committed to providing financial support for this important endeavor, we recognize that meaningful and lasting change cannot be achieved by one partner alone. The true strength of the Bangkok Rules has always been the spirit of international cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, as we embark on this new chapter, we warmly invite the diplomatic community, development partners, and like-minded nations to join us, not only in principle, but through your expertise, partnership, and investment to ensure that the Bangkok rules continue to move from paper to practice and bring real changes to lives of women in prison and in society worldwide. We are on the 15 years of the Bangkok rules. One truth becomes distinctly clear: the way a society treats women in its justice system reflects the strength of its rule of law, the depth of its compassion, and the maturity of its development. Rising female imprisonment reminds us that disproportionate punishment, limited life choices, and gaps in social protection must be addressed. This milestone gives us an opportunity to strengthen our efforts and turn the principles of the Bangkok rules into sustained action. We extend our sincere appreciation to UNODC for its continued leadership and partnership in advancing this important agenda. Thailand stands ready and fully committed to taking this vision forward together with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for the inspiring and promising remarks. We are now proceeding to the first keynote address. It is my great pleasure to now invite Professor Dr. Kittipong Kittayarak, Chairman of the TIJ Board of Directors, to deliver the first keynote address entitled From Vision to Action, 15 Years of the Bangkok Rules.
Your Excellencies, Anutin Charnvirakul, the Prime Minister of Thailand, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, everyone. Sawadee krap. It is a personal honor and privilege for me to be able to address this international forum on the commemoration of the 15th anniversaries of the Bangkok Rules. This year, as you know, we mark the 15 years anniversary of the adoption of the United Nations Bangkok Rules, and it gives me great pleasure to address this gathering in the very city that the rule has their names. I would like to share with you today to reflect on the journey that brought us to this point, a journey that spanned more than 2 decades, and one that I fortunately have had the privilege to witness from the earliest days. It is a journey that began with a simple yet very profound impact step. On a warm afternoon on July 2001, inside the Central Women's Correctional Institute in Bangkok, a young visitor met a woman whose quiet anguish spoke louder than words. The prisoner was a mother trying to raise her child behind bars. She spoke of fears no mother should face: the uncertainty of giving birth in custody, the difficulties of comforting an infant in a place never meant for children, and the heartbreak of knowing her child's future was shaped not by choice, but by circumstances. That conversation left a lasting imprint on the young visitor. Her Royal Highness Princess Patsilí Kittayarak Mahidol of Thailand. It was Her Royal Highness' first encounter with the realities of life behind the prison walls, and it ignites what would become a lifelong commitment to advancing the rights and well-being of women and children in custody. In 2006, I was serving as the Deputy Permanent Secretary for Justice, and I had the honor to be summoned by Her Royal Highness for consultation. I still remember very vividly the clarity and the depth of Her Royal Highness' concern. She told me that pregnant prisoners and mothers with newborns were among the most vulnerable, yet often invisible in justice reform conversations. In her own words, she described them as both vulnerable and forgotten, and she was determined to change that. Her Royal Highness initiated a very simple request to create a private space within the Central Women Correctional Institute to safeguard mothers and infants. She personally provided resources for immediate needs, such as diapers, milk powder, and essential supplies. From this very modest beginning, and through her relentless advocacy, the initiative soon grew into the Kamlang Chai project, or the meaning inspire in English. Kamlang Chai quickly became a transformative initiative, offering moral support, healthcare, and reintegration pathways for women across Thailand. It did more than improve prison conditions. It reframed how society understands second chances. From that very beginning, it also demonstrates a powerful truth that sustainable reform requires genuine partnership between government, civil society, and the private sector. Later on in 2008, Kamlang Chai was presented to the United Nations, gaining international recognition. The following years, Her Royal Highness launched the very important initiative called Enhancing the Life of Female Inmates, or we call it in short, ELFI. With a bold vision of that initiative, that is to create an international standard for the treatment of women prisoners which have gender perspective in it for the first time. With the support of numerous international partners, allies, like-minded countries, many of whom are here also in this room, that vision became reality. In 2010, exactly 15 years ago, United Nations General Assembly formally adopted the United Nations rule for the treatment of women prisoners and non-custodial measures for women offenders, now known worldwide as the Bangkok Rules. On that historic occasion, Her Royal Highness remarked in her word, and I quote, "If the year 2010 offers a cause for optimism for women, then let this be Thailand's contribution to the work of the United Nations," end quote. Having been part of this journey from the very beginning, I can attest that the Bangkok Rules were not simply drafted. They were built through compassion, collaboration, and a shared belief in human dignity. Over the years, I have witnessed how these rules reshape international discourse, influence national legislation, and transform global understanding of women's pathway into offending. I believe that the Bangkok Rule did more than set standards. They shift a global paradigm. They place women their experiences, vulnerabilities, and resilience at the center of justice reform in a way we had never seen before. And as time passed, their deeper legacies has become clear. The rule have encouraged countries to rethink their correctional system, not because they are compelled to do so, but because the principle resonate very well with the universal values of fairness, dignity, and humanity. From the inception, the Bangkok Rule focusing, of course, on women, but it has illuminated a broader truth that vulnerabilities in prisons extends beyond women prisoners. It includes individuals with mental health needs, persons with disabilities, older persons, LGBTQ individuals, foreign national, ethnic and racial minorities, and indigenous peoples. Moving forward, I believe that it is essential that we build on this foundation and ensure appropriate treatment for all individuals with specific needs in prison. A justice system worthy of public trust must recognize these diverse vulnerabilities and respond with care, dignity, and fairness. Now, 15 years on, we must ask what has changed. In my opinion, we have made significant strides in policy making and implementation. Across the world, there has been meaningful progress aligned with the principle of the Bangkok Rules. Many countries have incorporated the gender-sensitive approach into national laws and correctional guidelines. Here in Thailand, we also have integrated Bangkok Rules and the Nelson Mandela Rules into our Correctional Act and adopt a new narcotic code, eliminating mandatory minimum sentences and shifting toward health-based solutions. Yet challenges persist. As the Prime Minister mentioned, non-custodial measures remain underutilized. Too many women continue to be imprisoned for low-level, non-violent offenses rooted in poverty, correction, or for their own survival. Globally, the female prisoner population continues to rise faster than that of men, a reflection of, I believe, deeper structural inequality. The Bangkok Rule gave us a roadmap. Our task now is to accelerate the journey. Ladies and gentlemen, looking into the future, I believe that our priorities as an international community must be at least threefold. First, I believe we must reduce female imprisonment. Women are too often incarcerated for low-level, non-violent offenses rooted in gender-based violence, coercion, and economic vulnerability. Alternative to incarceration, diversion, community-based sentences, and restorative justice must become the norm, not the exception. The Bangkok Rules are clear. Imprisonment should be a last resort. Delivering on this principle requires legal norm, legal reform, practitioner capacity building, and sustained investment in services that address poverty, trauma, and survival-driven crime. Second, I believe that we must build a whole-of-society model for reintegration. Prisons cannot do this alone. Sustainable reintegration depends on partnerships. Government, civil society, the private sector, the communities working together to provide housing, employment pathways, and social support. The very idea that the Kamlang Chai project had initiated even before the Bangkok Rules. I believe that a society that believes in second chance enable not only women, but those who chose the long path to return with dignity and purpose. Third, I believe we must ensure that justice system strengthen resilience rather than diminish it. Justice should pair accountability with opportunity, transforming punishment into growth and reintegration. This is the spirit of the Bangkok rules, seeing women not as risk to manage, but as human potential to be restored. Empowerment through education, skills, healthcare, and dignity must therefore lie at the heart of justice, alongside efforts to dismantle stigma and structural barrier. When these three things that I mentioned align together, I believe the path forward is clear. Reduce unnecessary imprisonment, mobilize society for reintegration, and transform justice into a true engine of opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to close with these words from Her Royal Highness 15 years ago. By providing humane and compassionate conditions and treatment, we will be able to bring light into the darkness of their life and minds, to bring them hope and a measure of dignity. Ladies and gentlemen, that light has shone brightly for 15 years. Together we have brought hope and dignity to thousands around the world. Let that now ensure that it continues to shine even brighter in the years to come. I thank you all for your time, your dedication, and your commitment, and I wish you all productive and inspiring discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kittipong Kittayarak, for such an insightful and compelling reflection on the journey of the Bangkok rules over the past 15 years. May I ask you to remain standing on the stage in order to take the further session? Okay, and allow me to invite all distinguished participants, speaker, panelists that are invited, honored guests, to please come forward to the stage area for a group photo to commemorate this important occasion.
และในโอกาสนี้นะคะเพื่อเป็นหมุดหมายสำคัญของการร่วมแสดงพลังของเครือข่ายระดับนานาชาติค่ะขอกราบเรียนเชิญท่านนายกรัฐมนตรีเรียนเชิญวิทยากรผู้ร่วมอภิปรายและแขกผู้มีเกียรติที่นั่งอยู่บริเวณโซฟาและแถวที่1นะคะถ่ายภาพร่วมกันกับท่านนายกรัฐมนตรีด้านบนเวทีค่ะโดยทีมประสานงานจะอำนวยความสะดวกในลำดับถัดไปนะคะถ้อยคำที่ทรงพลังอย่างยิ่งเลยค่ะคำกล่าวของท่านนายกรัฐมนตรีมิได้เพียงยืนยันถึงบทบาทนำของประเทศไทยในการริเริ่มและสนับสนุนข้อกำหนดกรุงเทพเท่านั้นนะคะหากยังสะท้อนถึงความมุ่งมั่นอย่างต่อเนื่องในการส่งเสริมศักดิ์ศรีความเสมอภาคและความยุติธรรมสำหรับทุกคนในสังคมอีกด้วยค่ะรวมถึงปาฐกถาพิเศษของท่านดร.กิติพงศ์กิตยารักษ์นะคะได้สะท้อนภาพการเดินทางของข้อกำหนดกรุงเทพตลอดระยะเวลา 15 ปีที่ผ่านมาคำกล่าวของท่านได้ย้ำเตือนให้เราตระหนักว่าข้อกำหนดเหล่านี้ไม่ใช่เพียงมาตรฐานที่เป็นลายลักษณ์อักษรเท่านั้นค่ะหากแต่ยังเป็นกรอบที่มีชีวิตที่ยังคงชี้นำการปฏิรูปจุดประกายนวัตกรรมทางนโยบายและยึดมั่นศักดิ์ศรีความเป็นมนุษย์เป็นศูนย์กลางของกระบวนการยุติธรรมทั่วโลกค่ะ และเพื่อร่วมกันบันทึกภาพความทรงจำของวาระสำคัญในครั้งนี้นะคะขอเรียนเชิญทุกท่านที่ได้ร่วมถ่ายภาพและแบ่งปันบรรยากาศของงานผ่านสื่อออนไลน์ร่วมกันค่ะโดยใช้ hashtag 15 years of the Bangkok rules ซึ่งจะเป็นอีกหนึ่งการรวบสะท้อนพลังของเครือข่ายระดับนานาชาติที่มุ่งขับเคลื่อนกระบวนการยุติธรรมที่มีมนุษย์ที่มีความเป็นมนุษย์และตอบสนองต่อมิติทางเพศค่ะ
And next, we are honored to welcome Dr. Patsilí Toledo Vásquez, member of the United Nations CEDAW Committee and international expert on gender, justice, and human rights, to deliver the second keynote address titled Beyond 2025, Strengthening Access to Justice and Support for Women in the Criminal Justice System. So it is our privilege to now invite Dr. Vásquez, who is joining us online to deliver her keynote address.
Colleagues and friends, good afternoon. It is a pleasure and an honor to join you today as we mark 15 years since the adoption of the Bangkok Rules. These rules remain one of the most important and transformative developments for women in the criminal justice system. As a member of the CEDAW committee, I'm especially glad to see the diverse and committed participation of representatives of several countries and the presence of UN Women and UNODC in this event. Your engagement signals the global commitment needed to turn principles into practice. Today, my remarks focus on the path beyond 2025, on what must be done to strengthen access to justice and provide sustainable support for women throughout their journey in contact with the criminal justice system until their full reintegration, and how the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the CEDAW Convention, can be another pillar for that process, for accelerating the implementation of the Bangkok Rules and guaranteeing women's human rights. My intervention will be structured in three main areas. First, the need of addressing the gaps in access to justice. Second, the Bangkok Rules as a mechanism for CEDAW compliance. And third, a section I've called The Time is Now. So, first, addressing gaps in access to justice. This year, it's 15 years after the Bangkok Rules were adopted and nearly 10 years since the CEDAW committee adopted its general recommendation number 33 on women's access to justice. Still, we must honestly acknowledge that the gaps on women's access to justice remain wide, in particular for women facing criminalization. I will not go into details as I'm aware that the next panelist will provide rich information on these matters, but it's clear, as it has been already expressed by the keynote speaker, that across regions, criminal justice systems continue to rely heavily on incarceration of women, even for minor, non-violent offenses associated with poverty, discrimination, coercion, or survival. General Recommendation 33 reminds us that legislation and courts discriminate against women when they criminalize behaviors that are not criminalized or punished as harshly if they are performed by men, when they criminalize behaviors that can be performed only by women, such as abortion, when they put women in jail for petty offenses or for their inability to pay bail in such cases. Unfortunately, there are many more examples. One of the most critical elements in understanding discrimination against women is that it includes not only direct discrimination, but also indirect discrimination. That is, the discrimination that is not intended, but it's a consequence of apparently gender-neutral actions or policies. For example, when prosecution of organized crime focuses on the easy targets or the lowest levels of, for example, drug trafficking organizations, then the prosecution is indirectly discriminating against women. Not surprisingly, a higher percentage of women imprisoned worldwide are imprisoned for drug offenses compared to men. In fact, I come from a region where the increase of women in detention for minor drug-related crimes had led some extremely poor neighborhoods in practice without mothers. Neighborhoods where the short-term impacts of the incarceration of young women are extremely serious for children, for families, and the long-term consequences are yet to be seen. In other cases, the criminal justice system fails to identify women victims of serious crimes, for example, victims of human trafficking, when they are portrayed as at the same time as perpetrators. Mandatory arrest laws in domestic violence cases have also led to discriminatory criminalization of women, who are placed at the same time in the role of victims and perpetrators. In general, women's pathways to offending are rarely considered. Pathways that are frequently linked to violence, coercion, trauma, or socioeconomic marginalization. These are often simply ignored. The overrepresentation of indigenous women, ethnic and racial minorities, LGBTI individuals, foreign nationals, older women, and women with disabilities among the population of women who come in contact with the criminal justice system makes clear that an intersectional approach is extremely important. For example, when we consider crimes linked to drug use, sex trafficking, and immigration, especially for women from marginalized groups or communities. In addition, women often have no access to gender-responsive legal aid, and that takes into account the overlapping layers of intersectional discrimination many of them experience. The CEDAW committee has also emphasized that often alternatives to custody remain gender-neutral in design and therefore indirectly discriminating against women in practice. When women are deprived of liberty, they also face distinct needs in terms of healthcare, trauma-responsive services, contact with their children, protection from abuse, etc. These needs remain often unmet. General Recommendation 33 underlines that access to justice within detention requires independent monitoring, confidential reporting mechanisms, and safeguards against retaliation. Yet many women still face barriers in reporting violence or misconduct in places of detention. Monitoring bodies often lack gender expertise, or the access to them is limited. Without such monitoring, women's rights violations remain invisible, and without visibility, accountability remains out of reach. So I will go to the second area of my intervention, that is the Bangkok rules as a mechanism for CEDAW compliance. While the Bangkok rules constitute an example of what is called soft law, they play a critical role in enabling states to meet their legally binding obligations under CEDAW. The alignment between the CEDAW Convention and the Bangkok rules is both practical and strategic. In the first place, to connect or build bridges between soft law and hard law. The CEDAW Convention, for example, requires states to eliminate discrimination in law and in practice, ensure substantive equality, and address the structural causes that push women into conflict with the law. The Bangkok rules provide the operational guidance to implement these obligations inside the legal systems, courtrooms, prisons, and post-release settings. In the second place, these alignments allows to turn principles into measurable actions. For every major obligation in CEDAW, whether on gender-based violence against women, equality before the law, non-discrimination, or access to justice, there is a corresponding provision in the Bangkok rules that shows states how to implement them. This synergy should be made explicit in national justice reform strategies. It's not merely a conceptual link, it is an implementation pathway. In the third place, the alignment between the Bangkok rules and the CEDAW Convention strengthens national accountability. As you know, state parties to the CEDAW Convention, that is one of the most widely ratified EU human rights conventions, states parties report regularly to the CEDAW Committee. In the committee, concluding observations and recommendations, often there's a section on women in detention. These sections regularly include explicit references to the implementation of the Bangkok rules. For state parties, this is a unique opportunity. Implementing one set of standards simultaneously strengthens compliance with another. And third, I will go to this third section of my intervention that I have called "The Time is Now." Despite the Bangkok rules, despite the CEDAW framework, and despite global commitments to gender equality, we are still facing enormous difficulties for their implementation for women in the criminal justice system. One critical element is investment in women in the criminal justice system. Funding for women affected by incarceration is still strikingly low, and this lack of investment is both a consequence and a contributor to the deep stigma surrounding women offenders, a stigma that renders them invisible in policy making, in programming, and too often in public consciousness itself, including in the feminist movement. In some places in my region, in Latin America, when women are released from prison, they don't have anywhere to go. The stigma they carry even after their release means that their families don't want them back. The CEDAW Committee is currently working on its General Recommendation 41. This general recommendation focuses on gender stereotypes. And I didn't want to miss the opportunity today of inviting you all to share your insights with us, especially on the impact of stereotypes on the experiences of women in the criminal justice system. We know that one of those impacts is invisibility, and invisibility is closely related to underfunding. And what is underfunding in practice? It means legal aid that is limited or out of reach. It means data that is incomplete or simply non-existent. It means monitoring bodies that cannot visit all places of detention. It means rehabilitation, reintegration, and community-based services are unable to meet the demand or are non-existent entirely. It means civil society groups working directly with women in detention, a struggle for survival and for impact. In all areas of women's rights, we know that underfunding is a way of making rights and laws just a piece of paper. Without proper funding, the very system that are meant to deliver justice to women cannot function. If we want to move beyond 2025 with credibility, we need real investment in gender-responsive legal aid, in training for police and justice actors, in independent monitoring of detention facilities, in non-custodial alternatives tailored to women's realities, in reliable and transparent data, in the civil society organizations doing frontline work, and in reintegration programs that help women rebuild their lives after release. This is not simply a moral imperative. It is a legal obligation rooted in the CEDAW Convention, anchored in the Sustainable Development Goals, and clearly articulated in the Bangkok Rules. So the time is now. We have to fully integrate the Bangkok Rules into national legal frameworks and justice strategies. They cannot remain an optional reference document. They must shape sentencing guidelines, prison regulations, national gender equality plans, and the policies that address gender-based violence against women. We should never forget that most women in prison have experienced diverse and often severe forms of gender-based violence, and they are entitled to the same rights to protection, a specialized attention, and reparations to ensure their full recovery as all women. National human rights institutions, ombudspersons must have the expertise to address women's rights, must make unannounced visits as a routine practice, must publish their findings, and engage directly and meaningfully with women in detention. But also formerly incarcerated women, civil society leaders, and community actors need to be at the table when laws are drafted, when policies are designed, when oversight bodies do their work, and when research is undertaken. And for all that, we must mobilize resources through dedicated and sustainable funding. 15 years after the adoption of the Bangkok Rules, we know that these standards are more relevant than ever. The question is to give them the political commitment, the resources, and the visibility they need to transform the lives of women who encounter the criminal justice system. This requires all of us, governments willing to invest, donors willing to fund what has long been invisible, national institutions ready to challenge entrenched practices, and civil society organizations to continue doing essential work and pushing this agenda forward. As we head towards the 70th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, CEDAW, focusing precisely on women's access to justice, the time is now to make those commitments a reality. The CEDAW Committee stands ready to support this effort. We will continue to provide guidance, to hold states accountable, and to encourage the meaningful implementation of the Bangkok Rules into national laws and policies. Thank you so much.